Hey Addisyn, it's Dr. Scott. I have some feedback for you on your Essay 2 draft, on your rhetorical analysis draft. I'm recording this at home. There's folks that are doing tree work across the plate, across the way from us. My dogs might bark, so I apologize for all that in advance, but I wanted to get you some feedback before I head to campus tomorrow. Um, so in the rhetorical analysis, I'm looking for a few things, actually a lot of things. I'm looking for a thesis statement that's focused, that addresses the use of rhetoric in the speech that you're analyzing. I'm looking at your use of evidence from the speech and from your research to back up your argument. I'm also looking for the quality of the research that you're using. Are they credible sources? Are they actually used to help you support the thesis statement, or are they kind of used as filler in the intro and conclusion? And then I'm also looking for focused paragraphs and organization and transition. So there's a lot that I'm looking for in this assignment. I may not get to all of these issues. I'll try to touch on all of the major ones at least once. So I read your draft a couple times, and for me, I think the thesis statement's right here. It's this sentence right there. This sentence tells me that this is a paper about emotion. This is not what you're doing in your essay. You write about ethos, pathos. I think you also write about logic and in anaphora. So there's a lot more that's going on in your essay than just emotion. That being said, I kind of like the idea of focusing your attention on fewer rhetorical issues. It feels like your essay at some point, it's like just kind of a summary of where you're seeing credibility appeals or emotional appeals, and it doesn't feel like there's really kind of a glue here. So the argument that you have here is that he effectively uses emotional appeal, and I would add that you probably, it seems like you think that he's effective at using all the other rhetorical appeals as well, the rhetorical issues. So I think choosing rhetorical issues that you have your head around a little bit more, or maybe you feel more confident about. I think that you're writing about solid examples from the speech that could work for a logical appeal. I think sometimes you struggle a little bit to kind of explain that. The same goes with some of the credibility. Like, you use good examples for credibility, but I'm not always kind of understanding how you're explaining those examples. You could literally write a paper that's just about emotional appeals. You don't have to do that, but I think kind of limiting the number of rhetorical issues you're writing about and focusing on the ones that you have your head around a little bit better, I think that might be a good way to go. In the introduction, I kind of want to know more about the audience. I like that you started to give us a little bit of background. There's a news release that was directed at diminishing his fight for civil equality. Yeah, there were clergy members in the Birmingham area that were openly critiquing Martin Luther King's work, and these were fellow Christians that were calling him out, and he was pretty disappointed in that. So also thinking about the racial dynamic there, I think that these were white clergy members that he was arguing with in his letter from Birmingham jail. I think that is something that needs to be mentioned as well. So I think a bit more background and context here in the introduction would be helpful to kind of help us understand who the audience is. We definitely need to know more information about that audience. So in the ethos paragraph, I like that you're kind of starting here with my fellow clergyman. He's kind of putting himself on the same level. Okay, I think that makes some sense. Where I get a little bit lost is later in the paragraph. You're talking about how he is explaining his leadership with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and talking about his involvement in the civil rights movement. How was that persuasive to this audience that he's working with? That I wasn't entirely sure about. Like right now, there's when you mention Black Lives Matter and that movement, like that, some people feel that that's a credible organization, but a lot, like right now, it's pretty divisive, and folks are not, they don't see it as uniformly a good thing, unfortunately. So this, like, the civil rights movement back at the time and what King was trying to do at that time in the 1960s, it was seen the same way that Black Lives Matter is now. So kind of thinking about the audience and why you think this might be persuasive, That's going to need a little bit more explanation. Right now, I'm not sure how that works for his specific audience. Like maybe to us now, this makes some sense, but I'm not sure if it works for that audience back then. You kind of need to explain that a bit more. Towards the end of this paragraph about credibility, I get pretty lost. I'm not too sure how this is related to credibility, this back half of the paragraph. This is a draft, and I'm totally fine with just getting some ideas down on the page. I just want to let you know right now, if you're kind of feeling like this was getting closer, this paragraph, you need to rethink the second half of it. I'm not sure what's going on there. I mean, you even end it by talking about how it's an emotional paragraph. And really, you're not writing about paragraphs. You're writing about the entire speech and how he's trying to use rhetorical appeals. So, are there other places where he's trying to use credibility? He definitely talks a lot about the Bible, and a lot about his faith. So, making that a part of the ethos paragraph, that would make a lot of sense. So, in the emotion paragraph, I wasn't sure who this was. Is this a source? I don't know who that person is. You might need to kind of set up that quote or that paraphrase. It's a quote, actually. You might need to set up that quote a bit better. I think one pattern to consider for your speech, and I'm giving this advice to everybody, is that when you're writing about pathos or you're writing about credibility or logic, you name the rhetorical issue, and then you give us an example of that use of the rhetorical issue, and then you explain how it works as pathos, ethos. Like, here's why you believe it's credibility, and then you explain how it works to persuade a specific audience. That pattern seems to work pretty well for folks. Here, you're kind of setting up paragraphs where you're saying, I'm going to write about pathos, and here's an example, and then here's a little bit of an explanation. And sometimes the explanation is kind of hard to follow here. Like, I'm having a hard time figuring out what you're saying in here about this as an example of an emotional appeal. But then the last part that's really missing in the essay is, how is this persuasive to a particular audience? Like, who is he trying to persuade with this? And do you think he was persuasive or not? Maybe you think he could have been more persuasive. That's absolutely fine. You need to back that up, though, with some discussion and connecting what you're saying to specific audiences. Like I said, sometimes your writing was a little hard to follow. Sometimes it read like it was coming from a source, and I just need to caution you that can get you into some trouble. And I don't want you to be accused of plagiarism when that's not your intent. But there were some places where it didn't read like your writing, and it felt like it came from a source. This is a draft, and it's totally fine to fix that stuff up. But just me, when I have a source in here and I'm not sure how to integrate it, I will just put the quote in there for a draft, and I'll put brackets around it, or put a note to myself saying, like, need to cite this and set this up later. Like, I think that those kind of notes are totally fine for a draft that you send to a writing instructor. I'm totally fine with that. So that pattern that I mentioned, I think that that's really kind of important to think about. Tell us what the rhetorical issue is, give us an example, explain how it works as that rhetorical issue, and then discuss how it persuades a particular audience. And use more than one example per paragraph. Talk about how the examples are maybe doing something a little bit different, how they're similar. It gives you something more to write about. Towards the end of the paragraph, I'm kind of not able to follow what you're saying in some places. Like in here, I'm not sure. It feels like you're starting off paragraphs like this is a pathos or this is ethos, and then as you keep going in the paragraph, it seems like that focus you kind of drift away from that focus. So here, like this sentence in here, I wasn't too sure about, because it seems like you're trying to say that he's disrespecting them by saying that they might become an irrelevant social club. So what was the emotion that he was trying to get at with that? Was he angering them? Do you think he was doing that purposefully? Do you think he was doing it inadvertently and he just didn't have a good read of the audience? That would probably make it seem like he wasn't all that persuasive, which is fine if that's what your argument is. But I got really kind of confused here in the second half of the paragraph. Another issue that I'm looking for in this assignment is your use of organization and transitions and having a reason why you're going from one paragraph to another. So I think that this paragraph in some places was about emotional appeals. Down here, I think that you're going to start setting up, I see the word logos here, so logic. So you're going from emotion to logic, and there's not really kind of a reason why. It's not clear to us why we're going from one idea to another, and that needs to be clear in the revision. So arranging paragraphs in a purposeful way, so like there's a reason why you're beginning with one paragraph and then going on to another paragraph. That's something that needs to get some work between now and the revision. So in this paragraph, it took me a while to kind of figure out where you're going. I think that you were trying to write about logos. You're writing about a really excellent example of the logic that he uses, and that's when he is referring to Hitler and that the law thing. Like there were laws in Germany that were very immoral, but they were legal, and that does not, laws are not necessarily moral or not. They can be really immoral, and so he's making that critique there, and that's definitely a use of logic. Also think about like who he is trying to persuade here. Bring these ideas back to the audience. That's something that needs to happen in each paragraph. And right now we have no discussion of the audience here. It's just, he's saying this, and I think that this is an appeal to logic. You need to connect it and explain why you think this was persuasive to his audience. And one reason it might have been, Addie, is he was trying to persuade people that had a very fresh memory of the Second World War. This is the 1960s, maybe 20, 25 years. Not even 25 years, 20 years since the Second World War ended. And these are people that either fought in the Second World War or they grew up during the Second World War. They knew who Hitler was and they knew about Nazism. So they're going to read that very differently than we read it now. Right now it feels probably a little bit removed from back then, but at the time it was a very fresh reference. All right, so we're at the end of the essay. I think I'm fine with the draft, just kind of getting some ideas down on the page. I do think that you're writing about an example from the speech that supports logos that is really effective. I don't know if you're necessarily kind of got your head around other ways or how to talk about that example just yet. It does seem like you have something that you want to say about emotion. And it does seem like you have something that you can say about credibility. So I'm almost wondering if you limit the number of rhetorical issues, that might benefit you. That might help you out. I think you might be trying to do too much. The thing to think about, if you're like, oh my goodness, that means I just have 2 paragraphs, you can definitely write more than 1 paragraph about a rhetorical appeal. Think about emotion. There's not just one emotion that he's trying to get at here. I mean, there's guilt, there's anger, there's frustration that he's trying to get these folks to feel, shame maybe. So thinking about setting up a paragraph for each of those emotions, that might be more effective. You could write one single paper about emotion. You might also be able to write about credibility. Anyhow, what I'm trying to get at is the paper needs a bit of focus. I think you're trying to do too much, and it seems like you're trying to do all that stuff, and you're not able to do, to talk about it in some depth. So that's my feedback. That's a lot. But let me know if you want to talk about this. You have a ways to go, but I think that I see some ideas in here that you could build upon. All right, that's it for now. I'll talk to you soon.